So I'm gonna kick it off a little bit by doing just a really quick introduction, and obviously thank you guys for joining. We really wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to, with all this, remote and Zoom that's happening because of the virus, to really open it up to the gay community. It's Pride Month. Typically we're doing conferences and we're able to take advantage of that. So I just think that this is definitely the next best thing to do, and just really show our support and just take advantage of that opportunity. So our group here obviously has personal experience and obviously professional experience as well. So just to kick it off a little bit, we have Roxanne. She's been a surrogate before. She delivered a little girl for a same-sex couple in Spain, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then obviously Dr. Kaplan here, who is the IVF man, the amazing doctor. So obviously you meet many same-sex couples through your time of making babies. So thank you so much for joining us. And then of course, Corey, he's a previous intended father with us, and he has a little girl and a little boy. It'll be exciting to listen to your journey, because you've gone through it twice with two different surrogates, and great outcome with two little ones. And of course we have Rich here, so the attorney who has so much experience and wisdom, and obviously has children as well through surrogacy. So I'm excited to really, like I said, have you guys share your stories. And I think that really the audience is gonna appreciate hearing from you guys, and just, I think at the end of the day, it's knowing that this is an option, for a lot of people. And like I said earlier, with conferences that are just not happening now, this is a great alternative for sure. So let's start it off. There's so much to talk about. I want to talk to all you guys at once. But let's start it off with Dr. Kaplan. With what have you seen? And again, we're going to really discuss more about the LGBT community and try to really center it on that. But of course, along with IVF, what have you seen, let's say even in the past 5 years or so, how IVF has really, and surrogacy, of course, and egg donation has made it that much more possible for the guys to build their family. And and a second question to that first question is, are you still seeing double embryo transfers as often as you were before?
So it's good. First of all, let me start by saying I feel privileged to be part of this and part of treating the LGBT community. And I've felt that way personally and professionally for 20 years. And that was before it was in vogue, before it became a popular concept. Some fertility physicians at that point were uncomfortable. They were urologists, not treating men. It was always my basis of what I did, based part of my DNA, and you know that. I have same-sex male couples now whose children are teenagers. I've kept in touch with a lot of them. I get a great satisfaction out of it, both personally and professionally. So I feel as though it's evolved a lot. There are many centers doing IVF on the LGBT community. There are some very good centers all over the United States that do a really good job. It's not to certain thing that one center in one city can do it better than everybody else is really ridiculous. And maybe it's because I've done this for 29 years and over 20,000 IVF cycles, you get humbled a little bit. So let me start with that premise. I think too, the way I look at it is I like to work with, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And so I leave the side that I'm not an expert, like the legal side and your side, Stacey, and everybody, I leave it to those experts. And I think that's the beauty. And one of the questions you put online was, what do you seek when you're a patient? Is that try and get the best, the most experienced, who've done it a lot, who personally have experience, and I think is a very strong suit. But I leave that up to you. I don't try and be an expert in that field. My expertise is the IVF side. And I tell the patients that the IVF that I do is really no different technologically for anybody. It's a matter of who we're taking out of, who we're putting it into. It's more logistical, it's legal, it's financial. So those are complicated compared to the heterosexual couples. But the basic IVF is really the same. You need sperm, you need an egg, and you need a uterus. And I really tell patients that if you're comfortable here in your heart with technology, there's no reason you should have a child. It's just a matter of what technology you're comfortable doing and how long it's going to take. So if you limit those two factors, then you can't be that cocky and say that. But I think couples, the first thing I do is explain to them the IVF process. I don't know if that's your objective today, is just to go through it basically. But a lot of couples don't understand that you need in vitro fertilization, which is complicated. You need good technology. This is not a commodity. You're not buying a Mercedes, whether it's in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, it's the same car. You need to have the best of all parts of that paradigm in place to make this work safely, improve your probability, and do it properly. And that's my advice to couples, is find the right professionals, as you would do in all parts of your life. So with IVF itself, as we know, the technology has advanced tremendously. I'd answer your second question straight away. I highly recommend, especially using a donor egg and a surrogate, doing a single embryo transfer. And we got to weigh up the probability of success versus risk. And IVF has evolved from the measurement just being getting pregnant. Our patients want to get pregnant, it's expensive, to a point of how do we do this efficiently and safely. And with the technology advancing so much, our results are excellent with single embryo transfer. So I would advise single embryo transfer as the basis for this. Now, everybody's different, and we treat people individually. We all have different stories. So it's not rigid. There are circumstances where two might be an option. I think it's underestimated. We have surrogates where are not the typical fertility patient. So a surrogate carrying twins, I think it's a little less risky than a fertility patient, because she's proven. She's probably had a 9-pound baby, or maybe 2 or 3 of them. So I think the risk of prematurity is a little less, but it's still there. And now you're putting an extra person at risk. But I think you need to individualize that decision making. But I would say that the premise should be, going into it, should be a single embryo.
Yeah, that's definitely how we definitely portray it as well. Ultimately, yes, it is up to them, but we certainly guide them towards, the safest route. But, some intended parents still really want to transfer, the 2 embryos. But yeah, definitely we're seeing more and more single embryo transfers as well. And especially with the same-sex couples, obviously they're using an egg donor, so you have, typically a really good embryo quality. So yes, we're definitely seeing this.
And you know what, not to interrupt you, I think a tough question is really, which I think those that have done it or done their homework will bring up, is what's the role of PGT in a donor egg situation, which is controversial because the data does not show that dramatic improvement in pregnancy rates. But it does show quicker time to pregnancy. It does show reduction in miscarriage rates. And we know that even in the donor situation, up to 25 to 28% of embryos are abnormal, even in a young woman. And it gives you the option of doing gender selection, which should be an option for patients if they're interested in doing it. And I really believe as a physician that even if the couple decides not to do PGT, it needs to be brought up in the discussion. I think if you don't bring up PGT as an option, and Richard can help me with this, you're liable, because if that baby turns out to be a Downs and it was not brought up, that's going to have to be answered. Why did you not give me that option at this point in time? And especially with surrogates, some of whom would not terminate, you take that stress and pressure out of that equation of not having to wait till they're testing, where you know that's already been tested. So that's where PGT, I think, is important, I think, with a surrogate, because you take that whole variable out of the equation.
I totally agree. And we're actually seeing that to be a pretty common situation where the surrogates really prefer to match and carry for a intended parents who have done the PGT for sure. And then you're avoiding the risk of, let's say, an amnio. I mean, we don't really see those anymore because of the genetic testing is being done prior, and even with using an egg donor. So that's good advice too. Because you hear the flip side of that too, where patients and clients would be advised where, it's really not necessary because you've utilized, an egg donor, and that's not really factual, all the time. And really, like you said, it's a personal preference, but you definitely should educate the intended parents beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions for you as well.
I
For
knew
sure.
that. I thought anticipated.
You see, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. So you just hit it out of the park with one conversation. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we're going to be asking you some additional questions too as we move along. So I would like to move forward as well and talk a little bit with Roxy. Everybody always loves to hear from, the personal side of it. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your journey and what made you decide to carry for a same-sex couple. Was that really your first choice? Was it your only choice to where you're like, I only want to carry for a same-sex couple? Or if you could give us a little feedback about that, that'd be great.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I think when I went into this journey, when I started it, I was pretty open to anything, to same-sex couples or heterosexual couples. Just turned out that I was matched with, like you said, the IPs from Spain, to intended fathers. And man, that match process was amazing because they are just the best. We have the best relationship. My surrogate baby, she just turned 2 last couple weeks ago. And so we still keep in constant contact, but it was something that was never even a question or a doubt. It happened organically, and it was just such a perfect match when I saw their profile. And I feel like I have 4 kids of my own, and I'm a blended family, so I have 3 stepsons as well. So I have 7 kids total, and my husband and I just definitely wanted to bring that joy to another family, to help a couple create what we are so blessed to have. We were just excited to have that opportunity and be able to provide it to a same-sex couple.
And how involved was your husband during the process? I know, with obviously the intended parents being international, but there's still so many ways to communicate. And then even, with you as a surrogate being here with all the injections and all of that, how supportive and how involved was he?
He was by my side for everything. I mean, he was at every Skype meeting. He met them along with me right away. I mean, he was excited even when I brought it up to him. We had talked about it. We knew our family was complete, but we also knew that I love being pregnant. Yeah, right. I knew that I would not mind doing it again. So he was very on board. He was very supportive. Like I said, he helped me with all my shots, and if I wasn't feeling good, he rubbed my feet. And he has a great relationship with the intended fathers. They message him even when they don't message me. So he has a great relationship with them as well. And the little girl, she's always saying hi to us. And so he was very much involved, as well as my children. I mean, my kids' age are from 8 to 22. And so it was awesome experience for them to be a part of. You
have a 22-year-old. I would never guess that.
Right. Between them all, yeah.
I would never guess that. Well, that's exciting. And another question for you: when family, friends, even strangers, when they, were informed that you were carrying as a surrogate and for a same-sex couple, how was that feedback?
I actually had great support. I never had any bad vibes. I never had anyone say something totally rude, and I don't know if I just kept to my core group of support. I would say that maybe my dad was a little I'm not so sure about this, just in the beginning, because he just wasn't sure how everything worked.
Right.
But once I explained to him what was going on, and I never had any bad recourse from anybody. Everybody was so supportive, and they still all love seeing videos and pictures of, updates from her. And my intended fathers, when they were here after the baby was born, my son was graduating high school, so they actually came with the baby and met all my family, and my family met them and the baby. So it literally is like an extended
It was like one big party.
it was huge. Yeah, it was like my surrogate baby had come 2 weeks early, so
Yeah.
it changed, kind of how everything went. But I think it was amazing because then my whole family who watched the pregnancy journey, got to see the baby and they got to meet the parents, and we all just fell in love. And they're my, family in Spain, and I'm their American family. So it's like it never was awkward. It was never.
Yeah. So the little girl definitely has a big fan club for sure.
She does, for sure.
Lots of love. That's good.
Yes.
That's good. So thanks so much for that. So I'm gonna now reach out to Rich on more of the legal aspect of it all. And there's so many questions that, oh my goodness, I could ask you to. Yes.
Can I interrupt before Rich starts, if you don't mind?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I want this like a round table. So anytime anybody wants to jump in,
I just think that what was said now from a surrogate is very powerful. Yes. Because she talked about her dad, she talked about her children, you talked about 3 generations exposed to what it's about. So you have 3 generations understanding ART technology, same-sex couples. Children won't know the difference in the next generation. It's going to all be the same. That, to me, is what it's all about. Right there.
100%. It's literally like a full circle. And like you said, a whole nother generation, and it's remarkable. And, it's just such a changing evolution, even just IVF itself, a lot of people just really still don't quite understand it. So but thanks for definitely bringing that up, Dr. Kaplan. It's really touching. Yeah. So without, obviously surrogates such as yourself, this wouldn't be possible. So it's definitely touching for sure. Yeah, sure. So thank you for that. Rich, a little introduction, just, of course we have to throw in your personal story, of course, with your own children. And then I'm going to have some questions for you too. So after you share a little bit of the personal side.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Stacy. And to all those who are watching, as a gay father of twins with my husband, having gone through this process, it kind of led me to become an attorney in this field. It's really an honor to be able to help other same-sex families go through it. I mean, I love helping everyone, but it's especially meaningful for me to be able to give back to my community. So thank you for having me on the call today. I started we started our process in 2006. We talked to some friends a few years before that who said they had children through surrogacy. We're like, what's surrogacy? We had no idea what it was. So we, grilled them for lots of information, started interviewing doctors and agencies and lawyers and, put the whole thing together. And about 18 months, 20 months later, our kids were born. And, I found it, just such a fascinating process when we started. I interviewed with a lawyer. We met with a lawyer who was eventually going to be our lawyer in the process. And I just couldn't be more fascinated with it. And I was at a point in time with my other job where I had 6 months to look for something different. I was with a startup company, and most startup companies fail, and this one was going that way. So I had a long time to look, and I thought, what more would I want to do with my law degree? What more fulfilling work could I do than to help people build families? So that's how I got into it. That was 2006. And since then, I've done over 15,000 cases myself personally. I got lucky. I worked with a firm that had been in practice since 1992. So we've done almost 30,000 cases collectively since then.
That's amazing.
Super rewarding. And along the way, I chaired the American Bar Association Assisted Reproduction Committee for 5 years as well.
That's amazing. So congratulations for sure. I definitely wanted to ask you a question in regards to the legal process. One of the common questions that we receive often is the difference between a pre-birth order and a post-birth order. And then, of course, when intended parents and intended fathers, when they see the word adoption, they're really unsettled with that. So if you could just kind of educate us a little bit on that, in regards to just the different legal process with a few different states. Of course, not to go over every state, but just the differences would be really helpful.
Yeah, so when we talk about surrogacy, ultimately our legal objective is to obtain a court order that identifies that the intended parents are in fact the legal parents, and that their names will go on the birth certificate, and that the surrogate is not a parent, and if she's married, her spouse is not a parent as well. The states differ in how they approach surrogacy, but they generally break down into the two categories that you mentioned, pre-birth orders and post-birth orders. And there are actually a few states that have a little bit of a pre-birth process and a post-birth process, so they're a bit of a hybrid. The general rule, though, with pre-birth orders is that we like to get them in place, signed by the judge by the 7th month of pregnancy, but they're generally not even effective until the birth occurs. So it's done, it's out of the way, it's signed, it's paperwork we can give to the hospital, but it doesn't really take legal effect until the baby is born. The post-birth orders are things that we can usually go into court after the birth has occurred, and typically we can do that within a few days to a couple of weeks at the most. It does vary a little bit from state to state, but generally no later than 2 weeks post-birth. But most of the post-birth states we can do within just a few days. So the order is the same. It has the same effect. It just isn't signed by the judge until, a few days after birth. In all of these cases, we talk to the hospital ahead of time. So even if we are waiting for a post-birth order, we already have a conversation with the hospital 2 months or so before birth, so we can all get on the same page, and we have other documents that can give the intended parents the rights to do everything that they need to do in the hospital while we're waiting on the post-birth order.
And how common, I should say, is it for specific states to require a medical reason for the surrogate, to utilize a surrogate? How often do you see that? Because, for example, in Illinois, there has to be a medical reason. How common are you seeing that?
Well, the states require a medical reason for surrogacy.
That's right, medical, yeah.
Are pretty liberal in this regard, and not having a uterus is a medical reason.
Yep.
So there are several approaches to how the states look at surrogacy, and some states have case law that's been interpreted by the courts. Some have statutory law where everything's been spelled out in a written statute, and some have a little bit of both, and some have none. So in the states that have these statutes, there are a handful of those statutes that have that written requirement, but it is very liberally interpreted, thankfully.
Yeah.
We've worked really hard to make sure that not having a uterus is enough.
That's definitely a medical necessity. Yeah.
Exactly.
And surprisingly, when we have consultations, and that's a pretty common questions where the intended fathers think that it's just not possible because they need a medical reason. And I said, well, that pretty much is a medical reason. I mean, you really can't carry a child. So, yeah. Exactly. But there's still really, a lot of them are confused still about the wording, with that.
It can be, yeah. I mean, it dates back to old versions of what we call the Uniform Parentage Act that actually had that as a written requirement. You had to have a doctor sort of sign off that it was medically necessary. But over time, especially as same-sex marriage became legal and the states became more liberal in terms of family formation issues, we haven't really seen that become an obstacle for LGBT couples.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that. This is going to be really helpful. Like I said, it's one of the common questions, and so definitely helpful. So moving on to you, Corey. So nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. So I'm going to, ask you if you can just share a little bit of your experience. You've gone through the journey twice, 2 different surrogates, little girl, little boy. And if you can just kind of give us a little history of that and let us know how the process was. And then I'll have another question for you too after that.
Okay, yeah, cool, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me again. I share, I think, the same regard as Richard in terms of, the ability to give back to this community is so important. And I think if sharing my perspective is helpful, that I think gives me the opportunity to help others as well. So I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to chat about this. So my husband and I think it was, 5 years ago, we started this journey and decided that we wanted to be parents. And we debated, you know, between adoption and surrogacy, and ultimately landed on surrogacy for, I think, a variety of reasons. You know, it just felt right for our family. It felt like, you know, I think selfishly wanted to see our genetics come to life. And that was one of the reasons why we chose surrogacy. And so we decided to go down the path of surrogacy. And I think, you know, one of the things that was, because it's a confusing process, and I've talked to so many different couples who are, you know, starting to sort of embark on this journey, and where do I get started? How do I understand, you know, the different laws that exist around, you know, the different states, and like, do I need to go to an IVF clinic first? Do I need to find my own? Like, all these questions are out there. And I think it's a confusing journey for a lot of folks. And I think, you know, understanding that journey is confusing is the first step, and then understanding that there are agencies out there that can help you kind of navigate the entire the entire process is really helpful as well. So we sort of looked around to try to find, you know, what's the right fit from an agency perspective for us, and landed on FSC with you guys. It was one that really felt right. It was, obviously we're in Chicago as well, and you know, you guys were in Chicago. It felt like a good home, but it also just felt like access to the best resources. And obviously Dr. Kaplan is here. He's the best if anyone gets a chance to work with him. And so it was, I think, just a really good fit for us. And, you know, so for my daughter who's about to be 4, so we went down the journey with her first, and we did have some challenges, you know, in the first, you know, transfer. We had an unsuccessful transfer that was really emotional and kind of, I think, tough for us. And we were one of those couples that decided to go for 2 on the second time, and we did. And, you know, ultimately, you know, we ended up with her, which was obviously the beauty of the whole process. And so, yeah, we did that. She's a beautiful little blonde-headed girl. Our surrogate was in North Dakota. So you know, my advice kind of throughout all of this is spend some time, you know, understanding what you want to get out of the surrogacy journey. And same thing with the egg donation journey as well. I think that's really important for same-sex couples to think about is there's a short-term process to this and a long-term process. And I think you got to think through both of those as you go sort of embark on this journey. Is in the short term, what do you want to get out of this? And the long term, how do you want to structure that relationship with both parties, right? The egg donor as well as the surrogate. And think through all of that kind of before you go kind of having the discussions with agencies and potential egg donors and surrogates as well. So we sort of are of the thinking that, you know, that these are our kids' lives and they get to kind of dictate what they want. And so we wanted both an egg donor and a surrogate that were very open to whatever relationship they want to establish with that person. Ultimately, we love both of our surrogates that we ended up with. We still talk to them on a daily, almost on a weekly basis. You know, so our first surrogate, she's in North Dakota. So one of the only challenges I would say with that is just the distance. So we're in Chicago, she was in North Dakota. So that was really, I would say, the only piece of advice that I would give to folks is, you know, think about what distance means and whether or not you're willing to wait a little bit longer to find someone that might be a little bit closer. She was phenomenal. We loved her. She unfortunately medically approved to carry again. And so when we were kind of debating whether or not we wanted to go down and you know, the journey again and have another child, we decided we did. And so we had to go through the process again of finding a new surrogate, and landed on a great lady who lives right by us. She's from Indiana. And she's fantastic. And so, you know, the second time it felt like, oh, we've got this. Like, we've been through this. I understand the game now.
You think it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, like we've gone through the emotional roller coaster of everything. Like, we can do this. And actually, you know, had a successful transfer our first time, and my son was born 9 months later, and you know, he was awesome. We went through all of, you know, we did pre-genetic testing, and we actually did do gender selection. I think that's something that is a personal decision for some parents. But we ended up with a beautiful baby boy, and we got to, you know, be part of a lot, you know, because she was in Indiana and we're in Chicago, she was an hour and a half away. We got to be part of all of the appointments, which was, you know, it was a different journey the second time around. It was much more, it felt like we were much more part of the process, which I really liked. But yeah, and she's, you know, she came to his first birthday party. They brought their whole family, which was awesome. They do a
That's
big,
great.
they do a big holiday party out at their, they live on a farm in Indiana. And so there's a bunch of people that go out there. So we go out there for, for holiday parties, and the kids sort of hang out and stuff. So it's a really kind of cool relationship that we've established with both of our surrogates. And so, we, like I said, we kind of thought through the short-term and the long-term implications and what we wanted to get out of it. And so we definitely wanted a surrogacy journey where they were very open to us kind of continuing to have a relationship after birth. And same thing with the egg donor, if that ever happens, something that we would be very open to as well.
Now, are you still in communication with your egg donor?
The way that we structured it was, it's sort of up to our kids. We left it open with them. I don't want to force that conversation unless they want that. And so it's sort of up to them. If they at some point want to find out who that person is, then we left it open. So we've actually established, it sounds kind of crazy, but we established an email so that if at any point, we want to get in contact with that person, we've got like a separate email set up, and our kids could ever communicate and then figure out how they want to establish the relationship from there.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we recommend when intended parents are matched with a donor, and when that possibility is there for the future, and we definitely recommend, hey, just start a separate email, just really for that, for that relationship. Rich, how often do you see with the donor the openness, and especially now without the genetic testing, and how do you see that changing? And same thing with you, Dr. Kaplan. How do you guys see that just evolving?
So at least in terms of the contractual arrangements that we help put together, I've seen a dramatic increase in the number of contracts where we're drafting in the potential for future contact. We always, let the parents and donor know that contact can be initiated through the agency, through the attorneys, or through the doctor. There's donor sibling registry. You can have an anonymous email, but more and more people are really interested in leaving that door open for the child or children if they're curious in the future. And I think that's wise. I personally believe that. I mean, there's no wrong answer. Whatever is right for you is what you put into the contract. But I do see that increasingly.
I agree with Rich completely. I'm saying the same thing. And I believe in choice. So I think you leave a choice as long as it's done properly and legally. I think it's up to the parties to decide on that.
And there are a number of countries actually where if you use the donor, it's required that there be an open arrangement, because there are countries that really put a priority on the rights of the child to have that access. So certain people with certain nationalities or living in certain countries must include that anyway. So that's also increasing as well.
Yeah, for sure. We see it definitely increasing on our end as well, from an agency perspective, for sure. And really, Corey, what you were saying, it really piggybacks to Roxanne, what you were saying, which Dr. Kaplan, you pointed out that it's really now just the relationships that have evolved through the possibility of, building your family through surrogacy and egg donation. It's just amazing. That, that the intended fathers are open to and wanting to, build their families through surrogacy and egg donation. Because like you said, it's not easy. It's very overwhelming for a lot of, most people. No matter what, it's overwhelming. And until literally you're holding that baby in your arms, you just don't think it's really, it's realistic. So,
which is also overwhelming. I actually fainted both the times my kids were born. So that's also overwhelming.
When they're born, you're like, oh my goodness, like this really happened. This baby is here and healthy.
Which I was told that was very normal.
Well, you floated on like cloud 9 for a little while,
Yeah.
For sure. And you also brought up, Corey, a good point. We have a lot of intended parents that come to us and they just don't know where to start. They don't know if they should reach out to their attorney first, should they reach out to the fertility center first, and how long is the overall process going to take. So they're just really overwhelmed. So, we always advise, obviously we'll give them the process, and we'll break it down, and ultimately we'll leave it up to them. But we are, they're reaching out to us for us to guide them. They're looking for fertility centers and they're looking for attorneys to work with. So, definitely there's so many resources out there, but, if you Google anything, they're going to be even more overwhelmed. So, definitely the process, the guidance, the support is so needed. we've recently actually started a monthly support group for intended parents. And it's so needed. It's definitely so needed. And we're looking forward to that. Next month, it's actually going to be geared towards the same sex, intended father. So we're excited about that for sure. Dr. Kaplan, how often are you seeing, because we're still seeing it quite a bit, intended fathers that are utilizing both of their genetics with obviously the same donor? We're seeing that often, but we're also seeing we're not as many are transferring to anymore, like you had said earlier. We're seeing a lot more single embryo transfers.
Nancy, as the years have gone by, more and more frequently, I would say the vast majority, unless there's something really on the sperm analyses that's significant, then it might be where one partner decides to use their sperm only. But I would say that the vast majority is where the eggs are split between the two. And that's almost, it's unusual to do it the other way now. So, but I think it's an option for the couple to decide which way they'd like to do it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We're still seeing that quite a bit. Again, though, we're seeing a lot more single embryo transfers versus years ago. We've seen many, multiples being transferred, and that's definitely been a change in pace for sure. And Rich, you're laughing. Are you seeing that too, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm a terrible example of what would be the current protocol. We did ours. I mean,
with twins,
it feels like the dark ages now by comparison. We did not do PGT. We both contributed, and I'm laughing because we ended up with an odd number of eggs. So the conversation was, well, if you end up with an odd number, who gets to fertilize more? Him or him?
Who gets that extra one egg?
Yeah. And we also did fresh transfers, and now the primary protocol is to do create the embryos, freeze them, and do a thaw and frozen an FET. Basically.
Yep.
So,
but that's science that evolves.
Yeah.
And so we get better, and that's just part of what happens. I find it interesting the dynamic where one of the partners has low yield of embryos, even though they're splitting the eggs. So you have one embryo from one, the other has 8 embryos, and then you watch the dynamic between the two. I always tease them, but it's that can be difficult. So if you have only fertilization or embryo development on one partner versus the other. Mm-hmm. So that you have to handle delicately, obviously, but it's
and speaking of the frozen embryo transfers, versus a fresh cycle, I don't even remember the last time we've seen a fresh cycle. What do you think, Dr. Kaplan, as far as the overall success rate when you're comparing the two?
So I'm a little biased because I do a freeze-all on almost all my patients. So I believe in the concept that in a regular IVF cycle that when you stimulate someone, you hyperstimulate them basically, and the milieu of the uterus is not as receptive as when you can prepare that uterus more physiologically. And also you reduce the incidence of hyperstimulation, etc. So even in my general population, heterosexual couples, I'm doing a freeze-all in the vast majority. A large at PGT, so you have to do it anyhow. So for surrogacy, it's pretty standard to do, unless it's requested for some reason, a freeze cycle. So that's become routine for my practice. That doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. And I know there's centers that get good results. I don't think there's any compromise to freezing. If there was, we wouldn't get the results we get with PGT. And so very comfortable freezing. And it allows you not to have to worry about synchronization, timing. It just makes the process a lot simpler.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes it a lot easier on when you're obviously utilizing a surrogate and, to plan for it for sure. Yeah. And like I said, I don't remember last time we've even witnessed a fresh cycle. So yeah, definitely seems to be the common trends.
But you know what, Stacey, once again, you have to discuss it with a couple, because if a couple has success on a fresh cycle and you don't want to change what works, so they might be more comfortable doing fresh, and that would be fine. There's no deleterious effect on it, but as a standard, we're freezing all.
Right, for sure. Rich, I had a question, and this is just, mainly for all international intended parents. And of course, we have to talk about it while we have you on here. But in regards to the coronavirus, international intended parents, how common, or how often, I should say, are you seeing the intended parents still having issues coming into the country and obviously returning home with the surrogate births?
Well, it depends on what country they currently live in. It has nothing to do with where they are citizens. It matters where they are currently living when they want to travel over. So if they're in a country that is subject to one of the travel bans, then we have to work on getting permission from their local US embassy or consulate so they can be approved to travel here. We also have to check to make sure that their visas or ESTAs are current and valid as well. But we usually start working on the travel authorization part of their process about 3 months before birth. We petition the embassy about 6 to 8 weeks before birth with the idea of getting them approved for travel here 1 month before birth so that they can be here to quarantine for 14 days first, and then for the extra 2 weeks in case the baby comes early. I'm proud to say that everybody that we've had, and we've had almost 60 clients now from other countries, all needing to get here, they've all been approved. It's just a process, a diplomatic and bureaucratic process that didn't exist 3 months ago that we've all had to figure out together. And all of these embassies and consulates around the world report to the State Department in DC, and DC makes the final decision and reports back to the consulate, and then they get approval. Most of them have been approved, 2 to 3 weeks before birth. We're aiming for a month before, but they've all come through. If the international intended parents have had another child through surrogacy previously, and the child was born in the US, and so they are parent of a US citizen child, then they get approval automatically. So that's an exception to the presidential proclamation. The other cases, if they don't already have a US citizen child, you have to basically, as part of the petition, argue that it is in the national interest of the United States that they be allowed to be here. And the argument basically is they're the parents, they need to be here to make medical decisions for the baby so that the nursing staff isn't burdened with this. And the facilities are also relieved of having to take care of another person. So they have more resources to care for people who need it during this public health care crisis. And that argument has been winning. So it's been successful. It's just a matter of time.
That's great. That's because you're you can do it.
Well, a lot of the other colleagues in my field don't do this. We focus on international clients, so it's kind of in our lane, and we made it our business to learn what all was involved, and it's been successful, and I've been helping other attorneys do it as well. So I'm happy to share the knowledge.
Yeah, it's great. It's appreciated for sure. And are you seeing a delay in the newborns receiving a passport to head back home?
Well, great question. And the answer is yes. The State Department has basically halted all expediting of US passports. So if you apply, you go into the regular lane, basically, which could take, in the last few months, it's been 8 to 12 weeks processing time. The passport agencies just started reopening a couple of weeks ago. And so now that time has been cut down to anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. Expedited processing will probably come back online in another month, maybe. And then if that happens, then it's going to be another 3 to 5 days to get those passports. But, the State Department processes 18 million passport requests every year. That's 50,000, I think, per day around the country. So they're backlogged now.
They're a little backed up.
Yeah, and they will be for a while until they catch up.
Yeah, just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So as an alternate for couples, parents coming from certain countries, their home country can sometimes issue a travel document for the baby to return home on. So either the home country can issue a passport for the child, which usually has not been the case, but now they're coming to the rescue and doing that, which is great. Or they can issue an emergency travel document, a laissez-passer, which is French for let pass. It's a concept that you see in a lot of European countries, but Germany, Australia, Spain, the UK, they've been issuing passports, and most of the other countries have been issuing emergency travel documents.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I was reading one of your blogs, and it was pretty impressive, the number of international intended parents that you've helped. I mean, it's just wow. I mean, nobody could have ever planned for this, right? So
This was something that none of our clients could have imagined. And so we found ourselves having to figure this out for them because, they want to be here for the birth and they want to get home as well.
And they want to get home. They want to get back to norm, right? So they want to get home and share the baby with their families. So yeah, for sure. Dr. Kaplan, I have another question for you, and I won't keep everybody on too much longer, but I can talk about this all night. If you were to choose, say, a prime surrogate for, say, somebody who did want to transfer to, what would you say the top criteria is for you when you're looking to medically clear a surrogate?
I would take Roxanne.
I know she's the poster for everything. Your big heart, clearly you're healthy. That was a good question or good answer. Good answer.
I think surrogates are exceptional people. Obviously, you want someone who's proven, and that's a prerequisite. I think age is a factor, although, as you know, I have a mother carrying a baby for my patient right now. So she's 51 and menopausal, carrying her daughter's baby, an exceptional case.
That's amazing. I just shared that on my Twitter. I just read that article. It's a unique awesome
case. But I think a surrogate somewhere between 30 and 38, if I had to design it. I think there needs to be, from a physical point of view, we know the uterus doesn't age very much until 40. I want to limit risk to the surrogate. I think as you get older, you increase risk to the mother and to the child. I think there's and it might come across the wrong way, I think there's a maturity that is better at 30 or 32 than at 22, although I'll still do a surrogate at that age if she's had a child before. But I would want her to be proven with a healthy pregnancy previously. I think that's the most important thing. And then you have to go through all the screening process, obviously psychologically, infectious disease, and the home environment, etc. But I would say 30 to 38, previous pregnancy that was healthy, no history of prematurity, and just a rapport. It is an understanding of someone who's nice. I mean, I don't know how to define that, but I think by the time you've seen her, by the time nursing has, psychology have, I have, or any physician, legal has, we're very people sensitive, and you're going to pick that up. So there's that intuitive selection as well.
Right. A good person, for sure.
Just the way I think is not a typical scientist. I don't look at studies with P ratios. It's all humanity for me. And so I think that's a very big, significant part of what we do. And so that's how I like to practice.
For sure. Corey, did you have any specific criteria when you were really looking for your surrogates? Anything specific? And some of it, like location. I know you had mentioned, obviously you work with 2 different surrogates in different locations, but and so clearly location for you.
I think the first time around we were so just unsure of the process, but we wanted the outcome that we didn't really know what we wanted in terms of the journey. What we wanted was a healthy baby, right? And I think as we got through and kind of muddled our way through the initial parts of the process, we started to have the conversations on, what would be, a trade-off versus a must to have versus a nice to have, and those types of things. And I think, for us, the first time around, it was, someone who is caring, who we can trust, who we know is going to take care of, the child as we would, right? And I think that it was honestly sort of the only requirement we had in the first one. Obviously, someone who's open to a gay couple as well, that obviously kind of comes with the territory. I think that was kind of what we were looking for first time around. And quite frankly, almost all of the surrogates that I've ever met are incredible humans, that they're all doing it for the right reasons anyways. And so that was pretty easy, I think. And so we found someone that we loved in North Dakota. The second time around, we were like, okay, we've been through this. Let's think about now what location, right? So location was something that we prioritized the second time around, was because we wanted to be as involved as possible in the pregnancy journey. That was one that we did prioritize, which does take once you kind of narrow down your pool, it takes a little bit longer sometimes to find the right candidate that would be willing to work with us. And so that would be my advice too, is the more criteria to have, the longer it probably is going to take to find that right match. But I think, the second time around, it was, obviously someone who's doing it for the right reasons again, which we never ran into any issues with that. But I think location was just the second thing that we tried to find kind of second time around.
Stacey,
location was more important.
Stacey, sorry to interrupt again. For me as a physician, I have to make sure from a medical point of view that I'm maximizing probabilities. So even if I have to make sure that she's healthy, that the uterus is pristine. That's what I need to do. That's my job. So for me, what Corey's saying is really, it's excellent. But then on my side, it has to be prioritized medically that I'm giving this couple the best probability of taking on the healthy baby as soon as possible, as efficiently as possible, in an environment that is tolerable as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good point for that, for sure. There's just so much that really goes into, a great match and a successful match and a healthy journey overall. And at the end of the day, having a healthy child. I mean, clearly that's obviously the end goal. I have one more question, for Rich. We still, oddly, we have a lot of intended parents when they're discussing the legal process, they will ask, hey, I have, a family member or a friend who is an attorney, and how important is it that obviously our attorney is specialized in surrogacy and reproductive law? And surprisingly, we hear that a lot. And of course, from an agency perspective, we tell them that's super important, especially since the intended parents attorney is going to be the one drafting that direct agreement. So if you can just share a little bit about, obviously, the importance of legal, we all understand that, but are you still, or do you ever come across anything similar to that, where, people really try to think they can, they try to save a few, $1,000 to cut costs, or cut corners a little bit. So that's just something that we're still hearing quite often. Of course, we advise against that.
Yeah, I mean, I have several comments on that. First of all, I guess fortunately, the legal work that you have to do is, of all the professionals that are involved, it's the least expensive, compared to agencies and doctors. So to save $1,000 to have your cousin Mort down the street, who's a real estate attorney, try to draft your contract will end up causing more than $1,000 of aggravation, because the process will take longer. Drama will be stirred up because they don't know what they're doing. It's just in their best interest to get someone who specializes in this field. I mean, you wouldn't go to a dermatologist to do your IVF transfer.
No,
right?
No, that probably wouldn't be too successful.
Right, and you wouldn't go to a florist to match you with a surrogate. So the same rule would apply here. And it's also important that they think very carefully early on about what states are legally suitable for them as intended parents, because the state laws do vary from state to state, and somebody who doesn't practice in this area may not be aware of those nuances. And so you might get partway into a contract, or maybe even pregnant, and then find out you can't get your parental order because it doesn't work in that state legally. So you could just be asking for more trouble by trying to cut that corner in the early stages of the process.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, for sure. I'm just always, it doesn't surprise me anymore when it's asked, but it's brought up a lot more than I would expect it to be.
Stacey, let me add on to that too, as someone who's kind of gone through that process. I 100% agree that do not cut corners on the legal aspect of this, and do not cut corners trying to find a doctor that might save you a bit of money. This is an expensive process. It is. And I think, I don't want to shortchange the fact that, it is something that it can break the bank for a lot of folks. But at the end of the day, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're not able to get your names on the birth certificate, and you're in the birthing room, right? You're in the hospital, like everything worked out great, and now you're in a situation that is already emotional. You don't want to add the additional stress on anything from a legal aspect that would cause you stress. Coming from someone who's gone through it twice, we had everything buttoned up on the pre-birth order, so that when we were there, we'd already had conversations with the social work with the hospital as well to ensure that everything was seamless and flawless. I can't imagine trying to tack on any type of disagreement or discussion on legalities on top of the fact that you're also like, you've been introduced to your son or your daughter, right? So I think I 100% agree with Rich on that. Don't use your uncle or your brother or your aunt or your whoever on that.
Yeah, your best friend's husband.
Right. I would say for Roxanne as well, as surrogates, you want someone who's going to be able to advise you on every nuance. And there are risks for surrogates too, and you need to be fully apprised of them. And the surrogates don't want to be, the legally responsible parent either. So why take risk? It's for everyone's protection, to be honest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good point. Yeah, definitely, especially for the surrogate as well. Yeah. You want to make sure that the children are legally the intended fathers. So legal is important. That's a good point, Rich. You don't want to cut costs on the legal, and same with the medical. Like you said, Corey, this is such a huge involvement and expense, for everybody, and you don't want to cut corners when you're trying to have grow your family, for sure. And I'll wrap it up a little bit here. If you can just share a little bit, all of you as a team, how do you feel the support for the gay community who wants to build their family? Are you seeing a lack of it? Are you seeing more of it? What have you seen, in currently, I'm saying the last 3 years or so?
Oh, well, I'll start, and I'll say that, at least when we started our process in 2006, there were very few agencies and resources that were really fully dedicated to LGBT. Thankfully, that's changed dramatically, I would say. There's a lot of support out there, at least from my perspective, certainly in the last 3 years as well.
Perfect. What about you, Dr. Kaplan? I know you're more on the medical side of it, but you're so involved, and you're still in communication with so many people. Are you seeing more support? Are you hearing more support?
I haven't lived it like the people in this audience. So I come from where I appreciate what they feel and what they say because they've lived it, not as talkers. But I do definitely see tremendous support in Chicago. It's a city practice. It's multicultural, multinational. I have not had a problem, a critique. It's all been on the opposite. And it's just tremendous support. But as a physician, I like to set that tone. And so for me, it's very important. And so it always has been. And as I said earlier, I feel privileged to be part of the equation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And, and definitely, both of you, Rich and Dr. Kaplan, many of the times, often the times, you are the first point of contact for a lot of these intended fathers, So again, they're coming to you just overwhelmed and really probably relying on you for support, even if you don't realize it. They're picking your brains, and that's good, and you have that experience. So I think it's remarkable as well.
I think it's important in everything we do, especially here, is, and I know it's a cliche, is to set realistic expectation. Mm-hmm. And like Corey said, you want to go into being realistic, how long it's going to take, what it's going to cost you, work with the best professionals there are. Don't give a story up front. Just if you give realistic expectation as a physician and you treat the person as if it was your wife, sister, boyfriend, whatever it is, you can't go wrong. That's always the way to practice, and I think we all do that. So it's real, to me, that's the key. If I to teach anybody in this field coming up, is set realistic expectation. And then you'll be good.
Yeah, that's solid, strong advice for sure. Yeah, realistic expectations for sure.
And I would say there's three things that I would say. Just research and prepare. You can't cut corners. Do your research. You'll be much better off for it in the long run. Stay calm and stay the course. These are human endeavors. This is not just a machine that does its job. There are variables, and most of the time it goes smoothly, but sometimes there could be a bump in the road. Stay calm, and also just be patient. It's a longer process, and if you're looking to shave off a month or two in the grand scheme of the child's lifetime, what's another month or two? If it takes another month or two to correct course, or to wait for something that is important, then wait for it.
Right. That was actually one of the questions that popped up here was, how long does the overall process take? And, you know, that leading into that, that we typically say on average right around 18 months or so. But again, there could be bumps in the road, or it could be super smooth. It could work on the, you know, the first embryo transfer could take, and you know,
Yeah.
baby's here in 9 months or so, but it's not always that smooth. So like you said, you have patience, and really, I think it's important to trust in the team that is working for you, you know, and supporting you, whether that is, you know, your attorney, the agency, or your support group, or, you know, even the surrogate or the intended parents. You know, you develop this relationship with one another, and really trust in each other, because it's stressful, it's hard. So, you know, even for the surrogates, I think, you know, if a transfer fails, they feel like a sense of guilt, like they did something wrong. And, you know, we see it all the time in our support groups where the surrogates feel awful, and, you know, it's out of their control. You know, it's really out of their control. So I think for everybody, it's such a sense of support for both sides of the journey is super important. But definitely trust in the process, and trust in you know, your support group. For sure. So I think that, you know, we could wrap it up now. I had a few questions, but you really answered all of them during the conversation. So I really, really appreciate all of you for joining us. And I know that obviously our audience they're going to be just so thrilled to have this education and to hear these personal stories, and obviously listening to Dr. Kaplan and Rich talk. Just your expertise is super appreciated. So thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for putting it.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks.
All right. Good to see you, Rich. See you. Great, thanks. Nice to see you too.
Thanks, Dr. Kaplan.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Roxy.
Thanks.
Bye, Stacy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.